Hello, I'm Kathleen Olive, and welcome to this resource on medieval Burgundy for Limelight Arts Travellers. In this presentation, I will introduce you to a very fertile period of history in the region of Burgundy. In this series overall, we're going to be looking particularly at Burgundy in the Middle Ages, so from about the year 1000 to about the year 1500. But in this first presentation, I want to introduce you to the general history of the region within France, and therefore give you a context for why it is we're looking particularly at a 500-year period of Burgundy's history in the second two presentations. So first of all, just to locate you a little bit within the area that we're going to be exploring together. Burgundy is a relatively well-sized region within northeastern France. It's traditionally, historically, been connected to the histories of what are now modern countries to its east. So particularly it's been connected to the fortunes of what is present-day Switzerland. But you can see that in terms of its strategic position, it's midway between significant northern countries like England, which you can just see at the north of this map, and the south of France, and therefore the Mediterranean at large port cities such as Marseille. And in fact, for much of its history, Burgundy has been connected to those other places thanks to its location on a river network. So the River Saône within the region of Burgundy has been navigable since ancient times, connected to other more significant rivers such as the Rhone, taking people to present-day Switzerland or even down to the Mediterranean at the Bouches du Rhône. So it's been well connected since ancient times. It's also, as you will know, due to its reputation as a great region for agriculture and also for viticulture. It's also a very fertile region and one that has been favourable to human inhabitation for a very long time. If we look at the region of Burgundy itself and some of its main provincial capitals and some of the main bases that we'll be looking at in this presentation, we're going to be particularly looking at regions within the district of Mâcon. So I'm thinking there about places like Cluny, like Autun, like Solutré, which you'll see in a moment. And then we're also going to be looking at regions, towns and cities within the region of Dijon, so particularly the regional capital of Dijon itself, a very important political and artistic centre under the Dukes of Burgundy in the 14th and 15th centuries, but also the city of Beaune. And in the area of Auxerre, where you see Availlon, for example, we'll be also looking at Vézelay, which has had an important prominence as a pilgrimage destination dedicated to the cult of Mary Magdalene. So this is a map of the region with some of the places that we'll be looking at for their historic significance. And we're first going to start in the region, the administrative region associated with the city of Mâcon, at a place called the Roche du Solutré, or the Rock of Solutré. And we're starting there because this very distinctive limestone outcrop, which is only about 8 kilometres west of the city of Mâcon, is probably one of the earliest inhabited places, not just in this region of Burgundy, but actually one of the earliest inhabited places that has been identified in what is modern-day France. So since at least 30,000 BCE, and when we're talking about prehistory and we're not working with documents, but we're working directly with artifacts that have been excavated, there's always debate about archaeology, about timing. You'll even see years of about 50,000 years ago with respect to this area around Solutré. But at least for 30,000 years, humans have been living in the area around this rocky outcrop, which is, this is a prominence in an area of river valleys. People have been settled here in a kind of a hunter-gatherer community. And in fact, this place, the Roche du Solutré, has some limestone caves in that rocky outcrop. Here's an aerial view of that extraordinary landscape. And those caves were used by hunter-gatherers as places to store their equipment that they used in hunting. So stone axes and knives, blades have been found here, for example. But it was also a place where it seems that they slaughtered and divided up the animals that they were hunting, because large deposits of animal bones have been found in limestone caves here in this rocky outcrop in the region of Burgundy near the city of Mâcon. And in fact, this area is so prominent, the area of Solutré is so prominent in terms of French prehistory and the study of prehistory. You know, there are cave paintings in the limestone caves in this rocky outcrop as well, that there is now a museum dedicated to the prehistory of Burgundy in this area. You can't spot it in this aerial photo because according to environmental laws, the museum has actually been embedded within this, this rocky outcrop. And there's a scenic walk that can be taken to the top of the prominence that you see back here in this photograph. This photograph also, of course, highlights the importance of the area of Mâcon in the growing of Chardonnay grapes, a type of Chablis is made here that has a very high reputation within France. That's Puy Fouissé Chardonnay wine that you see the vines being grown here underneath that rocky outcrop. And this rocky outcrop became famous as a walking trail when François Mitterrand decided that he would walk to the top of this rock every year. It looks a bit like a very disturbing walk when you see it from below here. But if you look again, you'll see that there is in fact a kind of a gradual slope winding its way around the curve of this prominence up to the top, which is famous for the views that it offers of the region of Burgundy. People who were living in this area, let's go back to the map and look at Burgundy, the region of Burgundy again. People who were living in this area, you can see Mâcon is in the kind of southernmost point of the region of Burgundy as the boundaries are delineated today. They were, it's tempting to think of them as being so inland and so remote, but they were connected, as I've said, by riverine trade. And riverine trade in some of the ancient periods that have been excavated at sites in and around Solutré shows that these people were actually very well connected to luxury kinds of networks. You know, for example, in the 6th century BC, when we have people making more permanent communities within the region of Burgundy, this is the exact same time that the ancient Greeks are colonizing southern France, establishing the emporium of Massalia, or present-day Marseille. And so, in fact, some extraordinary artifacts have been excavated from the ancient period within the region of Burgundy, including what has been described as the largest bronze vessel to be excavated from the ancient world to this point in time. That's the so-called crater of Vix, which was excavated at a site not far from Châtillon-sur-Seine in the region of Burgundy. It is 14, not 14 centimeters, I beg your pardon. There's a zero missing there from my measurement. It is 140 centimeters high, as you can see in the photograph that you have in the inset at the bottom. An extraordinarily high quality Greek produced wine mixing vessel, and this was found in the grave of a princess of the community of Vix. The entire grave site has been dated to about 500 BCE, so exactly the period in which Massalia is being developed in southern France on the Mediterranean. So the sites that have been excavated for these kind of prehistoric communities in the region of Burgundy are quite interesting. Prehistoric because they don't yet have their own writing systems to describe their own stories, tell their own history. That will come, in fact, in the area of Burgundy. That will start to arrive in the Roman era. And from the 2nd century BCE, there are significant Roman communities in the area of present-day France. So Rome starts this campaign to conquer the land of the so-called Gauls. It's successful in the 2nd century BCE, establishing a Roman province of Narbonensis around the present-day city of Narbonne. You can see in the green on the map here that they've taken over, for example, the Greek emporium at Massalia or present-day Marseille. So there's this stronghold in the area that's taken by Rome from the 2nd century, and we start to see in Roman sources descriptions of the kinds of peoples because these are various language groups and various cultural groups living within the area of present-day France, and specifically within the area of Burgundy that we're focusing on. Descriptions of these peoples, these Gauls, a Celtic group, and how they live, kind of fascination with the differences, the cultural differences in these people. What we know from both written sources but also from archaeological excavations is that the Gauls tended to found their settlements on hills, on prominences, which they saw as very good for defensive reasons. The fortified hill town was known as an oppidum in the Latin term. In fact, when the Romans will go on to conquer the rest of Gaul, they will take over some of these settlements and also themselves build these kind of fortified hilltop towns, or what are known as an oppidum. And we have an interesting example of one of these Gaul towns that has been excavated on the mountain above the present-day city of Autun being refounded under the Romans as the city of Augustodunum. I can't say that. I find that very tongue-twisting, but in other words, named for the Emperor Augustus. So up above present-day Autun, founded as a Roman city, is this Gaulish city of Bibracte, as it was known, which seems to have been founded at the end of the 3rd century BCE, and which written sources and excavations tell us was an extraordinarily large settlement. At least 30,000 people lived within the strong walls and the kind of self-supporting community that was spread over the top of this hill, this mount above present-day Autun. Once they have a toehold in the region, it's not enough for the Romans to stop there. To begin with, the Romans and the Gauls live peacefully alongside one another. But of course, the person who sees a great opportunity in the area of Gaul is Julius Caesar, who launches a campaign in the 1st century BCE in 58, the year 58, launches a campaign for Rome to expand further north into Gaul and conquer more of the region for Rome. The way in which Caesar launches upon this campaign has been very well studied. It was very well documented and studied, of course, in his own time by principal actors such as Caesar himself. But essentially, to break it down in a summary fashion, what happens is that the group of people living in present-day Switzerland, the Helvetii, are seeking to expand further west. So you can see where they are on the map here. You see the Helvetii, and to the west, northwest of where it says Helvetii on this map, you can see the Saône River. On the other side of the Saône River is Dijon and Alesia. So the Helvetii are expanding west into this territory of Gaul, and some groups of Gaulish tribes call on Rome for assistance to stop that expansion, and Caesar sees this as an opportunity. It's an opportunity because those groups, those Gaulish groups, are not totally united themselves. So the group who calls for assistance from the Romans are the Aedui, but the Aedui have great rivals, the Averni, and the Averni, led by Vercingetorix, very Asterix-sounding name. None of this is, of course, coincidental. Asterix is a very historically well-grounded text. But Vercingetorix, this leader of the Averni people, actually takes this as an opportunity to resist Rome, to form a federation with some other tribal groups, and to resist the expansion of Rome that is given this opportunity by the call of the Aedui for assistance against the Helvetii. So you can see on this map here the various campaigns undertaken by Caesar's armies in order to respond to this call for assistance, but then use that call for assistance as an opportunity to expand the territory of Rome. Where Vercingetorix and the Roman troops meet is at a place called Alesia. Alesia was known from documentary sources to be in the region of Burgundy. If we go back just for a moment to the map, you'll see that it's pretty much centrally marked in your map on the screen at the moment, to the northwest of Dijon, and pretty much in the center of this map. So Alesia was described as a site by ancient sources. There were various theories about where it was, and then it was actually excavated in more recent times, and has now been turned into a kind of a reconstruction of the site as it was, and not just of the site as it was, but also of Caesar's ingenious way of laying siege to the Gaulish resistors led by Vercingetorix at Alesia, and that was to surround them with 2 concentric sieges and essentially to starve them out. Vercingetorix and his men resist strongly against this Roman siege, but eventually they do fall in 52 BCE, and Vercingetorix is taken captive to Rome and will die in Rome some years later. The site at Alesia today, as I said, it's a modern reconstruction of the siege techniques, and there's a museum dedicated to it. I can't find an aerial image for you, but the design of the museum is very cleverly recounting the concentric circles with which the Romans besieged Vercingetorix and his men. So a very interesting modern design calling to mind the history of this site. Vercingetorix, by the way, will be kind of co-opted in the modern era as a stand-in for French resistance to international oppression. You have this extraordinary statue of him here, which was designed by the great Eugène Viollet-le-Duc, a great French art historian, someone who kind of single-handedly reinvented our idea of the Romanesque in the modern era, someone with as an art historian, someone who left a huge legacy. And he designed this monument, which bears the inscription, "Gaul united, forming a single nation, animated by a common spirit, can defy the universe." This was commissioned by Napoleon III in 1865 as a kind of symbol of French nationalism. So Vercingetorix as a resistor to the colonizer from abroad. Of course, as we know in history, Vercingetorix is unable to resist. Alesia does fall to the Romans, and so inevitably does the rest of Gaul, becoming the province of Roman Gaul, with its various new cities and various road networks, which you see on the map here. With respect to the region of Burgundy, on this map, you would want to look basically north of Vienna, which is not Vienna, of course, but which is the French town of Vienne. You can see Lugdunum there, or present-day Lyon, a very important capital of Roman Gaul. Not part of the region of Burgundy, so I won't talk about Lyon. But if you are interested in the one-time Gaulish area at the time of the Roman conquest, the Gallo-Roman Museum in Lyon is an excellent museum to visit. But keep going north from Lugdunum, or present-day Lyon, and you will see the word that I cannot pronounce. That's Augustodunum. I'm sure there's a better way to say that. Augustodunum is founded and named in honor of Emperor Augustus. It's a new Roman city founded just underneath the Gaulish oppidum of Bibracte. Today its name has been contracted and we know it as Autun. And Autun is one of the cities in the region of Burgundy that has one of the richest Roman histories. So in fact, it's a place where we get to see the kind of infrastructure that the Romans built after they conquered not just present-day Burgundy, but all of what was Gaul. We can see, for example, at the bottom right, the Temple of Janus. We can see at top left a 17,000 seat theatre, so something that was designed for people in the surrounding community to come and use for various forms of entertainment. At the bottom left, we can see the way in which the original Roman city gate, one of the original Roman city gates of the Roman city of Augustodunum and present-day Autun, was later co-opted into a contemporary city gate for the city of Autun and has survived as the Porte Saint-André. This was a significant period for not just Burgundy, but for all of present-day France, Roman conquest, because with Rome came various new cultural influences. One of the most significant of those was, in fact, Christianity. So after the Roman conquest of Gaul, we see the period of local saints, also some not quite so local. So Mary Magdalene, for example, her brother Lazarus. We see the arrival of cults of Christian saints, which will become quite important for us when we come to look at the Middle Ages in the region of Burgundy. So this is a culturally significant period for Burgundy as well. But of course, there are greater forces at play here. What we start to see from the 2nd century of the Common Era is movements of people around Eastern and Western Europe on a scale that is remarkable. A scale that was once known by the epithet barbarian invasions, and which is now known as the migration period, because there are just so many different communities of people on the move for various reasons. And all of the colours on this map correspond to different groups of people who, in about a 400-year period, are making their way across Europe, challenging really the borders of the Roman Empire, causing disturbances at various edges of the Roman Empire at that point in time, requiring reformulations of political administration and social policy, and really changing Western Europe in major ways. They're one of the reasons, of course, just one of the many complicated sets of reasons for the eventual breakdown of the Roman Empire in the west of Europe, despite its survival over in the Eastern Mediterranean at the capital of Constantinople. So in terms of Burgundy and present-day France, it's from the 2nd century of the Common Era that those movements of people start to be felt in the region of Burgundy. Now, Burgundy is a name that we give the region today. It actually comes from one of these groups of people who arrive after this period. So until this period, Burgundy is not Burgundy. The Burgundians as a people don't exist yet. First, we have the arrival of the Franks, which is the orange line that you can see on the map here, arriving from northern Europe towards the area of the Baltic. And they seem to be followed by the group who will eventually in English bear the label Burgundians or the Burgundy. The best theory about where this group called the Burgundy come from is that they too come from the Baltic, that they come in fact from an island within the Baltic that has Burgund in its name, Burgunderholm Island, therefore becoming known in the places where they settle as the Burgundy. To begin with, they settle in the north of present-day Germany, and they are allies of Rome. But eventually they are actually challenged themselves by the expansion of another group of people. That's the Huns. They're the green line on this map. The Huns are going everywhere in this period. And the Burgundy actually are routed from their communities where they've settled along the Main River. And they have to be moved on by Rome as their allies and given new land and a new place to settle. By the year 406, they've regrouped, the Burgundy have regrouped to the point where they're actually able to mass themselves, cross the Rhine River, and found their own kingdom in the area associated with present-day Burgundy. And not only, so it's actually a bigger community than that. So they start as migrants, people on the move, as all of these coloured lines of people are on the move because of various other pressures, things like famines, things like overpopulation, things like political and social disturbance in their own regions. All of these things lead to a movement of people, and the Burgundy are one of those groups of people who eventually find themselves settling in the area of present-day Burgundy, but as I said, not only. So that by 443, this kind of kingdom of the Burgundians stretches essentially from present-day Savoy, so French Savoy, kind of the area of France northwest of the Italian region of Piedmont, over the Alps, in places associated with the south of Geneva or present-day Chambéry, for example, all the way over to the Saône River. So essentially between two major river systems, the Rhône and the Saône. They've got the Franks to their north, and they've got the surviving Roman Empire of the West to their south. On this map, you can see them, hopefully, where the arrow of my cursor is circling. That's the kingdom of the Burgundians. So they have occupied quite a large chunk of area in a very well-connected region of Europe, thanks to those river systems, and also to a very fertile region as well. This kingdom of the Burgundians becomes quite powerful. For example, by the end of the 5th century, the king of the Burgundians, Gundobad, is so powerful that he has palaces not only in Geneva, but also in Lyon. He has founded not one, but two different legal codes based on echoes of the Roman system to govern how his people live, one of which recognizes even the rights of women and children. So it's quite an interesting legal concept by our modern standards. He is starting to make strategic marriage matches in order to shore up the position of his kingdom in a map of Europe that is being redrawn politically all the time because of these migrations of people, the coming together of strong groups such as Ostrogoths, Visigoths, and the eventual collapse, kind of power vacuum of the Western Roman Empire in this period. One of his family members, for example, for whom he makes a strategic marriage is his niece Clotilda, who is married to Clovis, king of the Franks, very famously converts her husband. He has a very strategic baptism as a Christian. And Clovis will go on as king of the Franks to found the dynasty that we call the Merovingian dynasty, the kind of most powerful early proto-French dynasty before the Carolingian Empire. So this is a significant king, Gundobad, that he is able to make these kind of strategic matches and even indirectly assist in the Christianization of the Frankish realm through that marriage of his niece to Clovis, king of the Franks. So these are our Burgundians, the Burgundy. However, after Clovis's death, and this is something that we will see again and again with respect to the region of Burgundy, after Clovis's death, the territory that he has amassed, which we saw in the previous map, is a significant amount of land, has to be divided amongst his heirs. And the way it is divided is complicated. So if you look at the boundaries on your map here that give you the region of Austrasia, taking in, you can see Metz on that map, you can see Tournai and Cologne, and these modern cities on that map. You can also see Neustria, a region that was also sometimes referred to as Francia, so a kind of proto-France, which took in cities such as Soissons or Paris, or you can see Rheims, for example. And then there was another region within this tripartite division of Clovis's territory that includes the division of Burgundy as well. So Burgundia taking in, as you can see, present-day Provence, as well as present-day Burgundy and the areas of Switzerland, such as Lake Geneva, for example, quite a significant territory. Now, those three territories on the map do not look like they are the same size. But the three rulers who were given these territories to reign over were really being given the same amount of land. It doesn't look like it, but the returns, the kinds of taxes that they could expect, the tithes that they could expect to collect on those lands from putting those lands to use were more or less the same. So the fiscal return in these three territories was going to be more or less the same. So it doesn't look like a good split, but it is actually a good split. Nevertheless, of those three regions, the one we're interested in, Burgundy or Burgundia, is going to become the most powerful of those because it's under kings like Gundobad of the Burgundians, it's held on to a lot of its Roman vestiges. It's preserved a lot of the Roman civil code and bureaucratic system, and that allows it to become a very well-organized state. So after Clovis's death, when we've got this partition into Austrasia, Neustria, and Burgundia, in fact, the region of Burgundy is going to come out of this division quite well. The whole map will get redrawn. So we've had the Merovingian period at the time of Clovis, but the whole map is going to be redrawn after the death of Charlemagne as well. In fact, the whole thing gets redrawn, the whole map of Western Europe gets redrawn at the so-called Treaty of Verdun in 843. And it has to be because Charlemagne has conquered or allied himself to or inherited or married into pretty much all of Western Europe at this point in time. What had been the Western Roman Empire is more or less all the province of Charlemagne, who rules it, crowned by the Pope with the title Holy Roman Emperor. So there is a lot of territory to be divided up after the reign of Charlemagne, after the reign of his son, who's also king of the Franks, and the redrawing of territories after that period means that The area that had once been the kingdom of the Burgundians and then becomes the district of Burgundia gets redrawn again, as you can see on the map here. It's redrawn, and all of the sons of Louis I, himself the son of Charlemagne, are given a portion of the Frankish Empire. One portion is given to Lothar, one portion is given to Louis II, and one portion is given to Charles II, known as Charles the Bald. And this is known as the tripartite division after the Treaty of Verdun. This is, I think, a very charming manuscript illumination from a 15th century Burgundian illustrated manuscript. We'll talk shortly about the decorative arts in Burgundy at the time this was produced in the 15th century. But this is an illumination of this great moment in French history from a chronicle known as the Great Chronicle of France, showing Louis I at the right, blessing the tripartite division among his heirs. Charles II, the Bald, decides that Burgundy as an area within the tripartite division can really be carved off and can be given away as its own political unit to his brother, Richard the Just. So Burgundy, which had been part of the Burgundy, the modern area, which had been part of this larger kind of tripartite division of Frankish territory, is carved off into its own duchy. And Richard the Just is given this duchy by his brother Charles the Bald. In the early 11th century, a further privilege is given to this Duchy of Burgundy, in that the present Duke of Burgundy at that time, Robert, is given the right by his brother, again the King of France, to pass on the duchy. So rather than being a duchy that is nominated by the monarch, you know, we have this, for example, in the United Kingdom, where the Prince of Wales will be created Duke of a new region, but it's not a hereditary title necessarily. We move in Burgundy from that kind of a non-hereditary dukedom to a duchy that can now actually be bequeathed. So in 1031, Burgundy as a duchy becomes a hereditary state, and that allows for a kind of stability. Burgundy is, in addition to being a very well-governed place at this point in time, with those kind of bureaucratic systems that it's held on to through the 6th, 7th, and 8th centuries as a result of its old Roman heritage. It's not just well organized, it's also fertile, and as we've seen, it's also strategically well connected. So from the 11th century, the Dukes of Burgundy, who now have the power to pass that duchy on to their first male heir, are also engaged in making a lot of money. What we have to understand about the 11th century in Europe is that this is a time when powerful men feel that possibly, you know, the ticker is counting down on their lifespan. There is a huge fear, a millennial fear in Europe around the year 1000, that is the end time. That's the end of the nominated period in the book of the Apocalypse, after which we will have the second coming and the end of the world. So there's a huge fervor, a religious fervor associated with this period as well. And in the Duchy of Burgundy, where we have sophisticated, wealthy, and educated, and now hereditary dukes, we also, when we add in this factor of a kind of a millennial fear around the year 1000, we also see the blossoming of religious patronage. So the Dukes of Burgundy from the 11th century, starting with that first hereditary Duke, Robert, become huge patrons of monastic communities. They endow them with land, with privileges, with the right to collect tithes, with these enormous benefits that allow religious communities to become very big, very wealthy, and very powerful. And the two most important religious communities, not just in the region of Burgundy, but really for Western Europe from the year 1000 to about the year 1400, 1500, They are two monastic communities that are founded within the region of Burgundy, present-day Burgundy, and also the Duchy of Burgundy. And one is founded at the Abbey of Cluny, and that order is known as the Cluniac order. And one is founded in various abbeys, one of which is located in a town called Citeaux. Not far from present-day Dijon, and that order is known therefore as the Cistercians. So these two great orders, one associated with the 11th century, one associated with the 12th century, become in fact the two key monastic orders, both of them sub-branches of the order of the Benedictines, which will become politically important, theologically, of course, spiritually important, but also, as we'll see, very influential in terms of the kind of architecture and art forms that they sponsor. And these developments happen not just within the Duchy of Burgundy, but their influence spreads through all Western Europe. So it's very hard to overstate the significance of the Cluniac and Cistercian orders, which change the face of Western Christianity, as we'll hear more in a separate presentation. But really, this is what many people, in addition to great food and wine, come to the region of Burgundy for. They come to explore this history, this extraordinary flowering of spiritual communities from the year 1000 that then will change the face of art and architecture as well. The first and most important of these is the Cluniac order. You see on the previous image, you were seeing a reconstruction of the so-called Church of Cluny III, the final and largest church associated with that order. It had to accommodate up to 300 monks at any one time within that one church. It was larger even than St. Peter's in Rome at that time. Cluny III we'll talk about further in a separate presentation. But Cluny III was one of the most important churches for Western Europe, probably the most important church after St. Peter's in Rome, not just in terms of physical prominence, but also in terms of its religious significance. It sent out monks all throughout Western Europe and even as far away as the Holy Land. Alas, very little of the extraordinarily large monastic community of Cluny in the region of Burgundy survives today. Following the French Revolution, the monastery fell into disrepair and its parts were broken down. It was really auctioned off for the sum of its parts in the early 19th century. It's one of the extraordinarily sad artistic losses of the French Revolution. So that the enormous church that survives today, which you see in the images on your screen, was just one of the 4 towers that marked the end of the 2 arms or transepts of the church. So if you think about the aisle of the church and you think about the arm of a church, which is usually where the main altar is located, where the aisle and the arm meet, the arm is known as the transept. And this church had 2. That's how big it was. And this tower is just one of the 4 towers at the ends of those 2 arms or transepts. The image at right is standing looking from the perspective of the front door of the aisle of the massive church of Cluny III. And that tower that you see in the distance is the first arm of the church. So that gives you a sign of the size, an indication of the size of this church. In fact, you can see here remnants on the right and on the left of the massive piers that supported the masonry roof of Cluny III, an extraordinary achievement of Romanesque architectural engineering, which we'll talk about in a separate presentation. The influence of Cluny III can be felt all over the region of Burgundy. This is the by comparison, teeny little collegial church of Notre Dame in Beaune, a lovely city principally associated today with the wine growing industry. But this church was constructed itself in the 11th century on the same architectural model as Cluny III, a huge, very low building. I mean, architecturally, these buildings are low for reasons of structural engineering. We'll talk more about this in a separate presentation. A style that is often described as cave-like. We usually use the word Romanesque to describe this architecture. In fact, Burgundy church architecture of the 11th century gives us some of the most important examples of Romanesque architecture in Western Europe. But these churches weren't devoid of decoration. We're really lucky, in fact, that in the region of Burgundy, some of the best examples of Romanesque decoration of religious buildings survive. We have, for example, very precious 12th century frescoes in a small Grange church associated, again, a kind of a dependency of the giant Abbey of Cluny, only a few kilometres away from it, but a kind of a summer residence for the abbots of Cluny. This is the so-called Chapel of the Monks at Berzay-la-Vie, where we are really fortunate, as I said, to have some of the most complete frescoes of this period outside of perhaps some in northern Spain and some in southern Italy. So we're very lucky to have these 12th century Romanesque frescoes, again in Burgundy. But the thing probably that Burgundian churches are best known for in terms of Romanesque decoration is sculpture. We see extraordinary achievements in the art form of sculpture in the region of Burgundy. What's clear is that teams of masons are working their way around these huge new churches and decorating them with forward-thinking and innovative sculpture that also becomes more and more refined in technique and also style. The sculptor who is thought to be the key exponent of this period in Burgundy is Gislebertus, and here you have one of the triumphs of his work signed by him, as you can see, perhaps at Jesus's feet. This is the so-called Last Judgment tympanum, a kind of sculptural entranceway in the narthex or porch of the cathedral dedicated to St. Lazarus in Autun. Some of the sculptures which have now been removed from the interior of the church and are preserved separately, some of them in museums within the Cathedral of Autun, a private museum in the city of Autun, but also unfortunately dispersed in collections around the world, give us a sense of how inventive Gislebertus was, of how varied his artistic models were. This is Eve tempting Adam as she plucks a pomegranate, as you can see, a very interesting apple off the tree behind her. Or is it a fig? I leave it to you to decide. The artful covering of Eve's nudity, but the suggestive, sinuous curves of her body. She's almost more mermaid than she is woman. This is a lintel carving, so it was above your head as you entered into the Cathedral of Autun. Or perhaps the most famous of the sculpted capitals at Autun, the Dream of the Magi. They're just receiving an indication from the angel that they need to get up and follow the star that will lead them to the birthplace of the new king or Messiah. You see the three wise men here co-sleeping, sharing the same blanket, a beautiful sign of their unity, with an angel so delicately just touching the hand of one of the kings. And look, the other two kings are asleep, but bing, his eyes have opened as the angel so delicately touches his hand and indicates to him the star he must follow if they're to find Jesus at his birthplace. Extraordinary, economical, but charming, comic, touching, and aesthetically pleasing representation, all in one tiny little sculpted capital. I mean, it's just two little drilled holes that tell you that that king has felt the touch of the angel on his hand while his two companions continue to sleep. Cluny becomes so powerful, so big, so wealthy, and so concerned with outward manifestations of power and wealth that it seems inevitable that within 100 years, another monastic community will arise purporting to do what Cluny said it would do. So what Cluny says it's going to do in the decades before the millennium is it's going to reform the Benedictine order, and in the process it's going to reform Western monasticism and take it back to its origins, which are work and pray, or pray and work, ora et labora. But within 1,000 years, it's become far too powerful for its own good, according to other groups of Benedictine monks and reformers. And they instead found a new community, which they say will take them back to their original roots, back to their core business. So they are reformers of the Cluniacs, who in turn had been reformers of the Benedictine order in general. And this group of men live in various places. One of them, as I said, is called Citeaux, and one of the great reformers at Citeaux, Citeaux giving its name to the Cistercian order, is of course Bernard of Clairvaux. And St. Bernard is against a lot of things. He is against decoration in churches. He is against frivolous women. He's a great hater, I suppose we could say, but he's also for a lot of things. He's for the Crusades, for example. So in fact, he preaches the Crusades at Vézelay in Burgundy at the great pilgrim church of the Magdalene, for example. So also within this region, in the 12th century, we find the growth of a new monastic order, the Cistercians, which seeks to redress some of the excesses of the Cluniacs. So we find at places like Fontenay Abbey, as you see here, founded in the 1119, a new reforming community that is known for its austerity, for its strictness, so strict that in fact Cistercian monks are always getting sick because they deny themselves too many things that we actually need in order to get through life healthily. But we find architecture that is no longer on the same kind of elaborate, highly decorated style as the Cluniacs. And instead we find communities that build in a way where the architecture is doing a lot of the theological work. So the structure of the building tells you something about the cause of your belief. What do I mean there? Well, I'll go into it in further detail in a subsequent presentation. But here, for example, at the Great Pilgrimage Basilica of Vézelay, you see as the great curved arches of the building built in the, it takes so long to build these buildings, built according to one style. You can see that by the time you get down to the main altar, we've transitioned to the use of pointed or Gothic arches, which allow for greater windows to be opened up in the space, which allow for light to well up in new ways, and which actually allow us really to reflect on different elements of our belief. So reflect on the divine, reflect on the illumination of divine light, of the divine spirit. The architecture is doing some of the work here of our core beliefs in a different way to the Romanesque architecture of something like Cluny 3. So that, in fact, by the 12th century, between the Cluniac order of Burgundy, which you see in red, and the Cistercian order of Burgundy, which you see in blue, pretty much all of Western Europe is being touched by the influence of these two monastic communities that arise in the region of Burgundy. And their emergence in Burgundy gives us, as I've said, some of the key examples of medieval art and architecture in Western Europe. For about 300 years, Burgundy has been ruled by a series of dukes from a dynasty known as the Capetians, and each duke produces the requisite heir for the dynasty to continue. And this is the great period of the Romanesque and the emergence of the Gothic, as we just saw with the Cluniacs and the Cistercians. But in 1361, the last Capetian duke, Philip of Rouve, dies without an heir. I think he's 17 when he dies. He hasn't had time to produce a requisite heir yet, and the duchy reverts to the crown of France. And the King of France at that time, John the Good, decides that he will give it to his son, Philip the Bold, who has been a great political support to him in very difficult times, talking about the period of the 100 Years' War here. We'll go a little bit more into the detail of it in another presentation. And this inaugurates new dukes of Burgundy from a dynasty known as the Valois. And by the 15th century, the Valois dukes of Burgundy will be the most powerful, the most wealthy, and the most stylistically influential of all of the rulers of Western Europe. And I say that advisedly as someone whose training is in 15th century Florence. You know, the Valois dukes of Burgundy, you cannot even put them on the same kind of scale as the Medici family in Florence. This is an extraordinarily wealthy and powerful group, wealthy beyond people's wildest dreams. How did they get there? You know, they've just had this agricultural region given to them when it's given to Philip the Bold at the end of the 14th century. It's got some serious kind of structural problems as a result of its position. If we go back to the map, you know, Burgundy is kind of squeezed as a position, as a region. It's kind of squeezed between England and the emerging state of France in the area around Paris and south of Paris, around the so-called Ile-de-France. And so during the 100 Years' War, the region of Burgundy is devastated by troops moving back and forth. When Philip the Bold is granted it by his father in 1361, it's got potential, but it needs to be built up. And that's what Philip the Bold spends most of his career doing. He begins to really concentrate it as an administrative machine. He does that particularly by establishing a new capital in the city of Dijon. So Dijon grows under Philip the Bold. He also manages to expand his territory thanks to marriage, always a great way to get more territory. He marries into Flanders, for example, marries Margaret of Flanders, and with that adds to the Duchy of Burgundy essentially all of the Low Countries, with the extraordinary luxury ports at places like Bruges, ports that are dealing in both staple goods but also luxury trade, and therefore allowing the Duchy of Burgundy to control that trade and make a huge amount of money from it. He's a very good diplomat, you know, for successive generations. The Valois Dukes of Burgundy are very good diplomats. In fact, their downfall will partly arise because of a failure of diplomacy. They have to negotiate a fine line between the needs of England and the needs of their relatives in France at this time, and they managed to do that for a period of about 100 years. So they're able to play off those huge political difficulties of the years of the 100 Years' War. This is a period of precisely the period with the Valois Dukes of Joan of Arc, for example. So Philip the Bold is playing that game, but he's just added some extraordinary new territories to the duchy, not physically connected territories, but the lucre, the fiscal benefits of those territories will flow through to the coffers of the Duchy of Burgundy. And as a result, Philip the Bold also develops a taste for new styles of art and architecture, particularly those emerging in those Low Countries, a style that we would call Flemish. He has to build up an image of his dynasty. So we see him investing in dynastic tombs, for example. This is an extraordinary sculpted and painted well at the Charterhouse of Champmol, just outside present-day Dijon, a mental hospital now, if memory serves, part mental hospital, part museum complex. Well worth a trip to the suburbs of Dijon. And here he imports sculptors and artists from the Low Countries, one of whom will emerge to be one of the greatest and least known sculptors of this period. That's a sculptor you may not have heard of called Klaus Sluter. We talk instead about great artists of the 15th century like Donatello, but Klaus Sluter, I think, is the grandfather of them all. This is an extraordinary carved well known as the Well of Moses, but he's also responsible for the tomb of Philip the Bold and of his son, John the Fearless. And this tomb is now in the Museum of Fine Arts in Dijon, celebrated not just for its overall complex, you know, you're looking at black marble and alabaster here, which is very difficult to comprehend that those beautiful figures you see along the bottom are carved out of alabaster. Consider the expense. But also known for the extraordinary elegance of style, the kind of gracefulness, sinuousness of the lines of a work such as this one. Those mourners in the columns that support this tomb effigy are known as the pleurants, or the mourners. They are amongst the most celebrated works of Klaus Sluter and of his excellent assistant Klaus de Verve. But it's not just architecture and sculpture that Philip the Bold is interested in. He's also interested in decorative art such as manuscript illumination. And this is a tendency that continues down through the generations. So we're going to look separately at the Valois Dukes because they're so significant, but it's not just the Dukes themselves who are sponsoring artists like Jan van Eyck, Robert Campin, Roger van der Weyden, Hans Memling, you know, the greatest artists of the Flemish century in the 15th century. Some of their most important patrons are Dukes of Burgundy. But then it's also their court, their courtiers and their high-ranking officials who, to show their status and also their allegiance, commission works from the same artists. So that here, for example, you have a manuscript of an artist presenting his manuscript to Duke Philip the Good, the grandson of Philip the Bold. And on our left of the Duke, who's in the center left in black, black being an extremely expensive dye, looks very sober, is more expensive even than blue and red. To our left of the Duke there, you see, dressed in blue, someone who will leave some of the most important works of art, but also social institutions in the 15th century Duchy of Burgundy. And that's the Chancellor of the Duke, a man called Nicolas Rolin, who together with his wife pays for the construction of an extraordinary modern hospital in the 15th century in the town of Beaune. That's the very famous Hôtel Dieu or Hospice de Beaune. Which you see here with those distinctive Burgundian tiled roofs. You may know him from Jan van Eyck's portrait of his divine vision of Virgin and Child, known as the Virgin of Chancellor Rollin, now in the Louvre, one of the triumphs of painting of Jan van Eyck. But Rollin also commissions works from Roger van der Weyden, probably a student of Jan van Eyck, one of which, probably the largest, most sophisticated and most complete work of Roger van der Weyden's, still survives in the Hospice de Beaune. This is the Last Judgment, painted on a massive scale, very cheerily for the sick patients in hospital to look at if they were ailing, you know, just what you need to look at if you're in fear of death, a Last Judgment scene. The territory of the Dukes of Burgundy grows not just through militaristic expansion in the 15th century, but that is a significant way that they expand their territories, as we'll see in a separate presentation. But it also grows through marriage. So they acquire more territory through dynastic marriage matches. And you can see by the end of the 15th century, they are one of the most significant powers of Western Europe. So pretty much everything in orange here comes to Burgundy by the year 1467, and then within another decade they have acquired more territory in the stripes and the pink and the green, again through marriages and dowries and alliances of these kinds. You can see that with that much wealth and power and geographical control, they will eventually come into conflict with their cousins in the Kingdom of France. It might eventually be too hard for them to hold the conflict with England at bay, and they're also going to have to make alliances with significant other powers in Europe, such as the Kingdom of Naples, ruled by the Aragonese, soon to be the Spanish at this point in time, and of course with the Holy Roman Empire. And although the Valois Dukes of Burgundy expire at the end of the 15th century in circumstances that we'll examine separately, the vision that they had of marrying in order to gain territory and hold enemies at bay is finally realized by the so-called last Burgundian, the last great Duke of Burgundy, but known as the last Burgundian because really after him, and this is Charles the Bold, under Charles the Bold, or Charles the Foolhardy as he's sometimes called, under Charles the Bold, the duchy reaches its greatest point of expansion, but also implodes, not just for reasons associated with him, but also because the early 16th century in Western Europe is one of great political instability everywhere. Nevertheless, something quintessentially important about Burgundy and Flanders, in particular, the Low Countries, which had come into the Duchy of Burgundy thanks to marriage about a century earlier, something very important survives there as a legacy, and it survives thanks to a marriage match. So Charles the Bold's daughter, Mary, is married to the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian. And although she dies quite young due to a tragic horse riding accident at 23, the Burgundian legacy lives on through her two children. Her two children are Margaret of Austria, who you see at left, and Philip the Handsome, who you see at right, in a dual portrait with his wife, Joanna the Mad. Now, Mary has married the Holy Roman Emperor. Her daughter, Margaret of Austria, will end up as governor of the Habsburg Netherlands, kind of overseeing one of the very tumultuous periods and overseeing it very ably, it must be said, where the citizens of the Low Countries are beginning to revolt against foreign control. And we see the beginnings of the movement towards what will be very important Dutch Republic. So Margaret of Austria is able to ride those political waves as governor of the Habsburg Netherlands with great aplomb, in fact instructing her nephew Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor and King of Spain, in the extraordinary powers of political diplomacy that she has. He learns a lot from his aunt. But he's also a key part of the legacy of the Burgundians as well, because Charles V, who is both Holy Roman Emperor and King of Spain and of the Spanish Empire, is himself the son of Philip the Handsome, who you see it right, himself the son of Mary and Maximilian, and therefore grandson of Charles the Bold. He will marry Joanna the Mad, and they will produce Charles V, a Holy Roman Emperor, a man who, thanks to his imperial inheritance of the Habsburgs and his Spanish inheritance of what is now the growing Spanish Empire, thanks to the opening up of the New World, will be one of the most politically important figures of the 16th century, if not the most important political figure of the 16th century. So the last Burgundians do nevertheless leave an important legacy. But the Duchy of Burgundy from the 16th century onwards becomes of much less interest. It passes into the expanding state of France at the time of Francois I. It starts to look a lot more identifiably French. It looks more French Renaissance. You know, this is the lovely Chateau of Ancy-le-Franc, which is designed by an Italian architect, Sebastiano Serlio, a great kind of Palladian architect with a garden in the grand French style. We have the depredations that will follow. You know, we've had this Francification of the region of Burgundy from the 16th century, leading eventually to its kind of neglect and its retirement into a kind of an agricultural role rather than a prominent political or artistic role anymore. With the French Revolution, we see the destruction, for example, of the extraordinary monastic complex of Cluny 3, leaving us, as I said, only one of the towers of the two crossings of this great church as a remnant of what once was. Burgundy is industrialized in the 19th century in interesting ways. We see the exploitation of the waterways of the region of Burgundy in order to create the Burgundy Canal, and so connect the entire region in an industrial sense with all of its significant agricultural commodities to the Saône and the Rhône, and significant industrial waterways. Very interesting to read at the moment that the French government is looking into how it can reindustrialize some of these canal and river systems once more in order to move cargo off the road in trucks and get it more sustainably onto barges again. Interesting kind of concept, so that the Burgundy Canal becomes an important industrial, kind of proto-industrial arm of the region of Burgundy in the 19th century with its 189 locks. And of course, in the modern era, we see the emergence of the region of Burgundy as one of the most prestigious winemaking districts for all of France, and we would say internationally for wine as well. So these are the various forms of red and white wine, only those receiving significant appellations or official recognition of their status, of their ancient techniques, and of the care that is put into making them and judging them to be worthy of that criterion today. These are just the wines of the region of Burgundy that you see in the various colours here. Thanks to that wine prestige, Burgundy in the modern era becomes a significant tourist destination. But in terms of cultural tourism, as you can see, the things that we principally go to Burgundy to admire are great monuments of a 500-year period, essentially from the year 1000 to the year 1500. We get this very dense concentration of spiritual, religious, political, social, and aesthetic influence that spreads out from Burgundy and means that this small region punches far above its weight with respect to Western Europe. Thanks very much.